friends, welcome to my channel Sushant Spice. Today we are at the next topic of our Morra Gambit and we are going to discuss the setup of Sicilian Dragon today. And let's get started. This is our third lecture on the Morra Gambit. So let's get to the position quickly. After e4, c5, d4, cd, c3, dc and c3, we have the starting position of the Morra Gambit accepted. Last time we saw the Scavenging setup with d6 and d6. Today we will look at the g6 setup. So after g6, nf3, bg7. If black gets to play the move d6 instantly and nc6, we reach the dragon setup. The dragon setup is formed with the pawns on h7, g6, f7, e7, d6. This resembles the tail of a dragon, hence called the dragon variation. Although it's not an open Sicilian, black wants to get a similar setup. So bishop c4, and now see, firstly we will see that in this move order d6 is not correct. We are going to have this topic covered in two lessons. In the next we will see if first d6 is played and nc6, g6, bg7 can be done a bit later. So there can be these three move orders. Here we will see that after d6 it's mistaken because of c qb3. The tail of the dragon c is not intact now. Black will have to play the move e6, and as soon as e6 is played, d6 and f6 both squares become weak. Now comes c bishop f4, knight c6, rook d1. d6 comes under fire, and now after bishop f8 only move, knight b5, we can make out it's game over. d6 pawn is weak and the bishop had to retreat. Look at the difference in development. We can make out white is winning. Let's go back to the main position. So black has to play the move nc6 here. This happens to be the main way of playing. And here see, normally one would like to do the move castle and black would get the move d6. So this has to be avoided. Secondly, it's time to tell you that now the move qb3 is not correct. Because see, now after qb3 there will be the move na5. So now white, who seems to win the f7 pawn but will lose a piece. See, after bishop f7 check, king f8, the queen has only square on d5 to guard the bishop, but then comes nf6, queen has to leave the bishop with, let's say, qd3, king f7, and black is winning. So it looks as though after castle there will be d6, nf6 and castle by black, and black will establish the dragon setup, and where white will just have a pawn less. But do note that white never gives black chance to set up a pawn on d6. He goes with the right move e5. Very important move which many Morra players don't know, and they end up in an inferior position. Now see, firstly there is ne5 which we are going to cover in detail in the next lesson, but let me tell you a little bit about it. Also there is the move bishop e5. So ne5, you can call it a mistaken move here, because ne5, be5, bf7 check, kf7, qd5 check, king f6, the king has to walk out, and see, after ne4 check, king f5, g4, it's game over. The king has walked out, and soon it will be a checkmate. g4, g1, king h3 can lose to both ng5 and qe5, and after king f5, rook g5, instantly checkmate. So today's whole game discussion is about the move queen a5. After queen a5, white simply castles, and now there are two options. One is knight e5 to take the second pawn, and other is the move nh6, which I feel is somewhat better. After nh6, first re1, and now after castle, white simply overprotects the strong point on e5. So bishop f4. Now black has two choices. One is he can go with the move knight g4, otherwise he can play king h8. After knight g4, queen e2, white still protects the pawn on d6, and now see, h3 is in the air. So suppose black goes d6 attacking e5 one more time, then e takes d6, bishop d6, forcing the rook to go to d8, and it's white to play and win. It would be surprising if I tell you black is soon going to lose all his pawns. See, queen e8 check, rook takes e8, rook e8, bishop f8 forced, and now see, rook f8, kg7, rook f7. The king is pulled out, king h6, bishop check on f8, king h5, rook h7, knight h6 forced, rook h6, kg4, rook g6. The whole king side is gobbled by the rook, and now see, it's losing position. So with this move e5, white has created a terrible bind in the black position. Black cannot free the position with d6. So whole fight is all about the square e5 and d6. So black can do king h8 here. After king h8 also there comes now qd2, trying to exploit the knight on h6. Once again ng4 and now bishop b5, cutting off the queen's attack on e5. And now see, there is already a threat. Let's say e6, then bishop c6, d takes c6, h3, and we see that the g4 knight is trapped. So only hope is the move g5, otherwise the knight would be gone. But after bg5, knight e5, knight e5, be5, the knight on g4 escaped, but only to give a shattered position after be7, re8, qh6. It's game over. There is no defense to rook e5, queen e5, bf6 or direct bf6, bf6, re8, and it's lost position for black. So knight e5 is a practical choice, which is what black did in this game. So knight takes e5, knight takes e5. There are two options here. If queen e5, then re1, attacking the queen. Queen goes to h5, trying to trade the queens. White won't trade here. And see now again same problem, we are forcing black to go e6. As I said several times, e6 and g6 never go well. And see after nb5 it's losing, no defense to nd6 and nc7. So this is another losing position. So black takes on e5 with the bishop, be5, and here comes the strong move knight b5. Looks bit unusual. See, white instead of developing the piece plays knight b5, moving the same piece again. But see, there are several problems now. Firstly, there is the threat of queen d5, which would attack the bishop on e5 and the pawn on f7. The knight b5 blocks the queen's path. There are three ways for black to continue. See, a6, e6 and knight f6, simply ignoring. Let's see each one of them. After a6, see, just q d5, and after ab, not queen e5, but see, queen f7 check, which is even stronger. See, k d8, queen f8 check, kc7 and bishop g8. The bishop moves away, takes the knight back, and this bishop is ready to move now when rook c1 would win for white very easily. All the black pieces are scattered. So e6, this is another try, stopping q d5, but now see rook b1 and bishop has to go back to b8, and now comes the crushing move b4. Looks odd at first, but see, bb2 is a dangerous threat now. So if queen goes back to d8, bb2, f6, rook c1. All developed pieces are there for white, and black has all the pieces on the first rank. What a contradictory state of piece positioning. So after b4, black can do queen b4, but then to see bishop a3, queen takes c4, and the finishing move knight d6. Even rook c1 was winning, but see, this is too strong. No defense to queen f8. So in the main game, black played nf6, still white does re1. Firstly, forcing the bishop back to b8. If d6, then also we see that f4, trying to exploit the poor positioning of the bishop. Black has a small tactic here, knight g4, and after fe he tries qb6 check, forcing qd4, and then queen takes, knight into e5. Many would say black got 3 pawns for the piece and the position looks playable. But see, after bb3, you can see that black has no development. So white is coming up with bishop f4 followed by rook c1. The rook would enter the 7th rank. So we can conclude this white position is also winning. Let's go to the main game now. Black went bb8, and here many of my students suggest the very obviously bh6, and those who have already followed the analysis, they would consider the move b4. Do note that nd6, bd6, qd6 is not possible because even rook is hanging. So white here concludes the game actually in a forced manner, because the development is already too much, and he saw that the black king is also not well placed. That tempted him to look for the move rook e7. You can easily see that after re7, ke7, queen e2, the black king struggles. See, king f8 allows bh6 check, and the a1 rook is open. King d8 allows bishop g5, and we note that in both cases white is easily winning. Let's see. After re7, see, very strong. King e7, queen e2. If king d8, then bg5, qb6 forced, and see, re1. Absolutely no defense to queen e7, checkmate. And after king f8 to bh6 check, kg8. Here qf3 is very interesting. Nevertheless, white played the simpler qe7 in the game and it was time to resign actually. Black played bd6 and pf7 checkmate. Merely 16 moves and see black lost in such a terrible manner. So these were some of the ideas. The main concept here was to show you basic ideas that d6 should be stopped and to show you some very important lines which will help us play the Morra Gambit confidently. I hope you will find this lesson useful and instructive. Do let me know in the comments below. Thanks for your time.